In fear, the Homeowners Association built a stone wall across the back corner of my land while I was in the hospital having a heart procedure. In fear, then mailed me a violation notice saying I had damaged community property because I cut a temporary opening through the plastic safety fence just to reach my own barn. In fear, they did not ask permission, they did not show me a deed, they did not wait for a survey, and they did not even have the decency to build near the property line. In fear, they crossed it, poured concrete over my access lane, buried my old boundary marker, trapped my tractor behind the workshop. In fear. And then their president stood in my driveway with sunglasses on and told me the wall was staying because the neighborhood deserved a cleaner view. In fear. What he did not know was that my late wife had worked in county records for more than 30 years, and before she passed, she taught me exactly how to fight a land thief. In fear, you do not scream, you do not swing a hammer, you do not make threats in the road, you collect every page, every permit, every photograph, every careless email. In fear, and then you let the law speak louder than your anger. My name is Harold Whittaker, and I live outside a small town in eastern Tennessee. In fear. In a white farmhouse that has been in my family since my father bought the land in the 1970s. In fear. It is not the kind of place that impresses people who measure value by matching mailboxes and freshly edged lawns. My house has green shutters. In fear, a crooked porch step I keep meaning to fix, a gravel driveway that washes out after heavy rain, a tin roof over the workshop. In fear, and a line of red oak trees my father planted before I was old enough to hold a shovel. Behind the workshop runs an old dirt access lane wide enough for a pickup. In fear, a mower, a septic truck, and the small tractor I still use, even though my knees complain every time I climb onto it. That lane curves along the eastern side of my property. In fear, then reaches a service gate near the county road. It may look plain, but it matters. The main driveway in front of my house is narrow, steep. In fear, and bordered by two stone pillars my mother loved. Any heavy truck that needs to reach the barn, the well house, the woodpile, or the back pasture uses that lane. In fear. Firewood comes through there. Gravel deliveries come through there. The county once used it to reach a drainage ditch after a storm. My wife used to say that an access lane is like an old friend. In fear. You do not think about it every day, but when you need it, you are grateful it stayed where it belonged. For decades, the land east of me was pasture. In fear. Cattle grazed there, then horses, then nothing but tall grass and cedar trees. After my wife Ellen died, a developer bought that pasture and turned it into Fox Hollow Estates. In fear. A polished subdivision with stone entrance columns, black metal street lamps, decorative ponds, and houses large enough to make my farmhouse look like a shed from their second-floor windows. In fear. I did not resent the new people. Towns grow. Folks want nice homes. I waved at the builders, tolerated the dust. In fear. And even let concrete trucks turn around near my back lane during the early months because their new streets were not finished yet. I told one foreman. In fear. Just do not block the gate. And he thanked me like a decent person. That was before the Homeowners Association formed and elected Preston Vale as president. In fear. Preston was a retired real estate broker who spoke slowly, smiled thinly, and treated every conversation like a negotiation he had already won. In fear. He wore pressed golf shirts, expensive loafers, and a watch that flashed in the sun when he pointed at things he did not own, the first time he came to my porch. In fear. He brought 2 board members and a woman from the property management company. He said the association wanted to discuss a visual improvement along the community edge. In fear. I offered everyone iced tea because my mother raised me right. Preston declined and looked past my shoulder toward the workshop, the old tractor. In fear. The split firewood and the rusted weather vane on my barn. He said several residents were concerned that my side of the boundary did not reflect the appearance standards of Fox Hollow Estates. In fear, I told him gently that my land was not inside Fox Hollow Estates. He gave me a patient smile, the kind people use when they think old men are confused. In fear, he said, "Of course, Harold, nobody is suggesting otherwise. We are only proposing a tasteful stone wall on the perimeter to create privacy and protect property values." In fear. Then he unfolded a glossy drawing on my porch rail. It showed the subdivision lots, the clubhouse, the walking trail, and a thick gray line marked decorative boundary wall. In fear. The gray line ran straight across the back of my access lane. I put my finger on it and said, "This is on my property." Priest said the developer S site plan showed a buffer area along that edge. In fear, I said, "A buffer on your developer S drawing does not change my deed." One of the board members, a woman named Denise, said the lane appeared unused and might be considered abandoned. In fear. I looked at the mud on my boots, the tie ruts behind the workshop, and the trailer parked by the barn. Then I said a dirt road does not have to wear a suit to be real. In fear. Prieston chuckled, but his eyes went cold. He said these older rural parcels often had flexible borders before modern planning standards. That was when I ended the conversation. In fear, I told him the association had no permission to build, dig, grade, cut trees, store materials, enter the lane, or move a single rock on my side of the boundary. In fear. That evening, I wrote the same thing in an email to Prieston, the board, and the management company. I attached my deed, my tax parcel map. In fear, and the last survey Ellen had kept in a folder labeled Whiteacre Boundary. I also told them that any work on my property would be treated as trespass. In fear. Prieston replied 2 days later with polished nonsense. He said the board appreciated my perspective, but the association had the right to maintain perimeter improvements for safety. In fear. Privacy and community harmony. That phrase, perimeter improvements, sounded official enough to scare someone who did not know better. I did know better. In fear. Ellen had spent half her life handling old deeds, subdivision plats, easements, and disputes between people who thought a nice letter could overpower a recorded boundary. In fear, so I called the county planning office and asked whether Fox Hollow had a permit for a wall near my land. The clerk found a decorative wall permit. In fear, she emailed me a copy. The permit showed the wall several feet inside the subdivision common area, nowhere near my access lane. I printed it. In fear, highlighted the location and placed it in the folder with Prieston's email. After that, things went quiet for a few weeks. In fear, I thought maybe someone with sense had looked at the records and told him to leave me alone. Then I went in for a scheduled heart procedure. In fear, it was not emergency surgery, but it was serious enough that my sister drove down to stay with me. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and came home tired. In fear, sore and happy just to sit in my own kitchen. The next morning I heard a low beeping sound behind the workshop. At first I thought pain medicine had me confused. In fear. Then I looked out the back window and saw a loader, pallets of stone, orange stakes, and men digging a trench across my lane. I stepped onto the porch in slippers and a robe. In fear, holding the railing because I still felt weak. The workers had already removed 2 old fence posts, scraped away gravel. In fear. And painted a line straight through the road my family had used for half a century. I walked down slowly and asked the foreman who authorized the work. In fear. He was not rude. He looked uncomfortable. He showed me a work order from Fox Hollow Estates and said he was told the land was association buffer property. In fear, I told him it was private land and he needed to stop. He called his boss. I called Prieston. Prieston answered too quickly, like he had been waiting. In fear. I said your contractor is digging on my property, he said. The project was proceeding under approved association authority. I told him the county permit placed the wall on his side. In fear. He said the permit drawing was conceptual. I said my property line is not conceptual. Then he said something I will never forget, Harold. In fear. The board is not going to redesign an important community improvement because of one sentimental dirt path. I was standing there with stitches under my shirt, in fear, looking at a trench through the road my father built, and I understood that Preston had chosen that week on purpose. He knew I would be gone. In fear, he knew I had objected. He knew the permit did not match. He believed speed would become strength. If the wall went up fast enough, he thought I would be too tired. In fear, too old or too broke to make them take it down. I told the foreman again that he had no permission. He shut the machine off for an hour. In fear, then Prieston arrived in his silver sport utility vehicle with Denise, another board member, and the management woman. Prieston walked toward me without a hard hat. In fear, glanced at my robe and said he hoped I was feeling better. It sounded like an insult dressed as kindness. I pointed to the trench and said, in fear, that lane is my access to the back of my property. He looked past me at the barn, the tractor, the old woodpile, and asked, access to what exactly? In fear. That sentence did more damage than any shovel. It told me he did not see my place as a home, or my road as a road, or my land as land. In fear. He saw an ugly gap between expensive homes and thought his board could improve it by taking what was not theirs. I told all of them to leave. In fear. Prieston said I should speak to a lawyer before interfering with permitted work. I said, Prieston, I am not interfering with your project. You are invading my property. In fear, the crew left the machines and pallets there overnight. The next morning, against my written objection, they came back. By sunset, the trench was deeper. In fear. By the end of the week, the first section of wall stood across my lane, a heavy stone-faced structure nearly 6 feet high, with a concrete footing wide enough to make removal expensive. In fear, it blocked the service gate completely. It trapped my tractor and utility trailer behind the workshop. It covered the low drainage path that carried stormwater toward the ditch. In fear. When rain came, water pooled against the new wall and spread toward my barn, soaking stacked firewood and leaving a muddy sheet across the pasture gate. In fear. Then the association sent me a certified letter. It accused me of damaging temporary construction fencing and warned that any attempt to alter the wall could result in civil action. In fear, I had cut a strip of orange plastic mesh so I could walk from my workshop to my barn on my own land. That was the moment I stopped feeling only angry and started feeling focused. In fear, I called Grace Mallory, an attorney Ellen had trusted before she died. Grace specialized in property disputes, boundary problems, and local government issues. In fear, she had a quiet voice, but when she asked questions, each one landed like a nail. Did you warn them in writing before construction? Yes. Do you have the permit? In fear. Yes. Do you have photographs before and after? Yes. Did they block access? Yes. Did they disturb a marker? I believe so. Did the wall change drainage? In fear. Absolutely, she said. Do not touch the wall. Do not argue with the crew. Do not threaten anyone. Start a timeline tonight. Save every message. In fear, photograph everything with date stamps. Then hire a licensed surveyor who will testify if needed. The next morning, I called Andrew Pike, a boundary surveyor with gray hair. In fear, steel-toed boots, and the expression of a man who had spent too many years watching confident people misunderstand maps, he arrived with 2 assistants. In fear, county plats, a metal detector, and equipment that looked more expensive than Priestess watch. Prieston drove by while Andrew was setting up near the road. In fear, he slowed down, saw the tripod and flags, then kept going. Andrew found the original iron pin near the county road. He found the rear corner by the creek. In fear, the marker near the wall was missing from view, likely buried under the footing or disturbed during excavation. Using the recorded bearings and remaining monuments. In fear, he marked the true property line with bright pink flags. The flags did not run near the wall. They ran behind it on the Fox Hollow side, leaving the wall plainly inside my parcel. In fear, not by inches, by several feet in some places, and by more than 8 feet near the access lane. Andrew stood there with his hands on his hips and said, in fear, Harold, they did not make a surveying mistake. They made a decision. His preliminary report showed that the wall, trench, footing, stone base. In fear, drainage, gravel, and landscaping were all built across my land. He also noted obstruction of a long-established access lane and possible destruction or burial of a property monument. In fear, Grace sent a formal demand letter that afternoon to Prieston, each board member, the property management company, the contractor, the developer. In fear, and the county building department, the letter demanded immediate stop of all work, preservation of records, removal of the encroaching wall. In fear, restoration of the lane, repair of drainage, payment for survey costs, and compensation for property damage. She included the survey, my original objection. In fear, the county permit and photographs. She gave them a deadline and warned that continued work after notice could support claims for willful trespass and additional damages. In fear, the contractor pulled his crew the next day. That told me the contractor understood risk better than the board did. In fear, Prieston responded through the association attorney with a letter that sounded expensive but said very little. It claimed the boundary was disputed. In fear, the wall was a safety improvement. My access lane had been abandoned through non-conforming rural use, and the association had relied in good faith on the developer's buffer plan. In fear, Grace read it in my kitchen while drinking black coffee, which from mug she smiled once and said, he is handing us exhibits. County building sent an inspector 2 days later. In fear, the inspector compared the approved wall permit with the actual location, looked at Andrew's flags, photographed the trench, and asked me whether I had signed any construction access agreement. In fear, I said, no. He asked whether I had granted a temporary easement. No. He asked whether the association had submitted a revised site plan moving the wall. In fear, no. He placed a red stop work order on the wall where every Fox Hollow resident facing my property could see it. Work suspended pending review. In fear, that red notice did something no polite letter could do. It made the invisible problem visible. Prieston had been telling residents the wall was delayed because an unreasonable neighbor wanted money. In fear, now there was a government order on the stone and people began asking questions. A young father named Mark walked over one evening while I was taking pictures of the pooled water. In fear, he said. He lived in the house closest to the wall and asked if I really was suing to stop a privacy barrier. I told him I was trying to remove a wall built on my land. In fear, he looked at the survey flags, then at the wall, then back at me. He said, they told us this was association property. I said, Mark, if it were association property. In fear, they would have shown you a recorded document instead of a rumor. He asked if he could take a picture of the stop work order from the road. I said yes. In fear, that night someone forwarded me a Fox Hollow community email from Prieston. In fear, it said the association was being forced to defend its rights against an adjacent owner attempting to exploit a minor boundary discrepancy. Minor boundary discrepancy. In fear, that was what he called a 6-foot wall across my lane. Grace told me not to respond publicly. Instead, she filed a complaint in county court seeking a declaratory judgment in fear, trespass damages, injunctive relief, and removal of the encroachment. She also requested attorney fees, where allowed, and preservation of all association communications about the project in fear. Discovery is a plain word for a powerful thing. It means people who were comfortable talking in private suddenly have to explain themselves on paper in fear. The emails started coming out. One from the management company warned Preston that the neighboring owner had objected and that construction should not proceed without a current survey. In fear, Preston replied, "We cannot let an old farmhouse dictate the appearance of a premium community." In fear. Another email from Denise said residents wanted the workshop hidden before spring showings because 2 homes were going on the market. Preston replied, in fear, "Place the wall close enough to eliminate the view." The contractor asked for boundary confirmation. Preston sent back a marked drawing that shifted the wall toward my lane and wrote, in fear, "Use this alignment." The county permit drawing was attached below it, showing a different alignment entirely. Grace printed that email and placed it on top of the folder. In fear, she tapped it once and said, "This is the sentence he will regret." The legal pressure was bad enough, but the permit problem became worse for them. In fear. Andrew reviewed the drainage records and discovered that the area near my lane was part of a natural swale recognized in the subdivision approval. In fear. The developer had been allowed to build Fox Hollow only if drainage patterns along the property edge were preserved. A solid wall in that spot required an engineered drainage plan and county approval. In fear. They had neither, so the wall was not only on my land, not only outside the permit location, not only blocking established access, in fear, but also interfering with drainage conditions tied to the subdivision approval. County planning issued a violation notice requiring the association to show cause why the wall should not be removed. In fear. That is when Preston switched from arrogance to panic. But he tried to hide it behind more arrogance. He called me directly one morning. In fear. Even though Grace had told his attorney to communicate through her, I put the phone on speaker and recorded a note to myself afterward. Preston said, in fear, "Harold, this has gotten out of hand." I said, "It got out of hand when you dug a trench through my lane." He said, "Removal would be costly and embarrassing for the community." In fear. I said building it was costly and embarrassing for me. He offered to have the association purchase the strip under the wall. I asked if he was offering fair market value plus damages. In fear. Restoration, legal fees, drainage repairs, survey fees, and compensation for losing access. He said I was being vindictive. I said, "Preston." In fear. "I am being precise." There was silence. Then he said, "You people never think about progress." I hung up before I said something Ellen would have frowned at. In fear. The association held an emergency meeting the following week. Grace advised me to attend because residents deserve to hear the facts in the room where their dues were being spent. In fear, the clubhouse was packed. People stood along the back wall with arms crossed. Some looked angry at me. Some looked confused. Preston sat at the front with the board. In fear, jaw tight, papers stacked neatly before him. He opened by saying Fox Hollow was facing an aggressive legal challenge from a neighboring landowner over a small section of a necessary privacy wall. In fear. Grace stood before he could build more fog. She introduced herself and said she represented Harold Whitaker, owner of the property on which the association had constructed a wall without permission. In fear, Preston said this was a members-only meeting. In fear. Grace replied that her client had been publicly named in association communications, and that the board could either allow a brief factual correction or explain later why it refused. In fear, the room murmured. Preston waved his hand like he was granting mercy. Grace connected her laptop to the screen. She did not dramatize. She did not insult. In fear. She showed my deed. She showed the subdivision plat. She showed the approved permit location. She showed my written objection sent before construction. In fear. She showed photographs of the trench, the blocked lane, the drainage pooling, and the buried marker location. Then she showed Andrew's survey with the wall drawn in red. In fear. Sitting inside my boundary, the room changed. You could feel people stop listening as neighbors and start listening as homeowners who might have to pay. In fear. A woman in the second row asked Preston if the board had ordered work after receiving my objection. Preston said the board believed the objection lacked foundation. In fear. Grace clicked to my email with the deed, survey, and parcel map attached. A man near the aisle asked whether there was another survey proving the association owned the strip. In fear. Preston said the matter involved complex interpretation. Grace said, "If the association has a competing license survey, please show it." Nobody moved. In fear. Mark stood up and asked whether association dues had paid for construction on private land. Preston said the wall served the community. Mark said that was not the question. In fear. Then Grace showed the email where Preston wrote, "Place the wall close enough to eliminate the view." Someone in the back said, "Are you kidding me?" In fear, Denise looked at the table. The management company representative stared at her hands. Preston said the phrase was being taken out of context. In fear, Grace clicked again and showed the full chain, including the contractor asking for boundary confirmation. The silence after that was not empty. In fear, it was full of invoices, special assessments, and residents realizing their president had gambled with their money. In fear, the county hearing happened 10 days later in a plain meeting room with fluorescent lights and a long table. Preston arrived with the association attorney. In fear, I came with Grace, Andrew, and a folder Ellen would have been proud of. The county official reviewed the permit, the survey, the drainage condition. In fear, and the stop work order. The association attorney tried to argue that removal was excessive because the wall was substantially complete and benefited the neighborhood. In fear, the official asked one simple question: is the wall on property owned by the association? The attorney said the association disputed the interpretation. In fear, the official asked again, do you have a deed, easement, agreement, or survey supporting the wall's location? The attorney did not answer directly. In fear, Grace provided Andrew's sealed survey and my deed. The county ordered removal of the encroaching wall section, restoration of the drainage swale. In fear, reopening of my access lane and submission of any future wall plan entirely within association property. In fear, the order required the demolition to occur under county inspection because of the buried marker and drainage issue. Preston looked straight ahead while the official read it. In fear, for the first time since I had met him, he had nothing to say. Demolition day came on a clear Tuesday morning. The air smelled like wet leaves and diesel. In fear, a crew arrived with a small excavator, a dump truck, safety cones, and the unhappy efficiency of people paid to undo expensive mistakes. The county inspector stood near the lane with a clipboard. In fear, Andrew was there to reset the boundary monument. Grace stood beside me by the workshop. Across the line, Fox Hollow residents gathered on patios. In fear, sidewalks and the edge of the common area. Some had coffee cups, some had phones. Nobody cheered, nobody needed to. The red stop work order still hung on the stone. In fear, faded by weather but bright enough to read. Preston arrived late in his silver vehicle, wearing sunglasses and a pressed jacket. He stood with Denise and the association attorney. In fear, trying to look like a man overseeing a correction rather than a man watching his pride get loaded into a dump truck. In fear, the first bucket of the excavator hit the top course of stone with a crack that echoed against the houses. Blocks shifted, scraped, and fell. In fear, dust rose from the wall that had cut my lane in two. Piece by piece, the beautiful illegal thing came apart. Workers removed the stone facing. In fear, then the concrete blocks, then the footing. When they reached the area near the buried marker, Andrew stepped in and directed them carefully. In fear, they chipped and lifted until the old iron point was exposed, bent but still there beneath concrete splash and gravel. Andrew reset the monument properly and drove a bright witness stake beside it. In fear, the county inspector photographed the location from several angles. That little metal point, no bigger than something a careless person might kick aside. In fear, had more authority than Preston's entire board. Around mid-morning, a resident woman walked over to the public side of the road and said softly, in fear, we were told you wanted money. I said, I wanted my road back. She looked at the open trench where the wall had been and said, I am sorry. A few minutes later, in fear, Mark came by and said the board group chat had exploded. Residents were demanding to know the total cost. I told him they deserved the truth from the people who spent their dues. In fear, by noon the wall section was gone. The lane was rough, scarred, and muddy. Open, the crew laid temporary gravel so I could pass. I climbed into my old pickup. In fear, started the engine and drove slowly through the gap in front of everyone. I did not wave, I did not honk, I did not look at Preston. In fear, I simply drove from my workshop to the service gate using the road my family had always used. It was not revenge in the loud sense, it was restoration. In fear, sometimes justice is not a speech. Sometimes it is 4 tires rolling over ground. Someone tried to steal the settlement followed after the association's insurer. In fear, attorney and remaining board members finally accepted what Preston refused to admit. Fox Hollow Estates paid for demolition, full restoration of my access lane. In fear, drainage repair, replacement of damaged gravel, resetting and recording of the boundary monument, tree damage, survey costs, court costs, and my legal fees. In fear, they also paid for an engineer to design a proper drainage solution on their side. The association recorded a written acknowledgement with the county stating that my land was not common area. In fear, not buffer area, not association property, not subject to their rules, and not available for construction, maintenance, access, landscaping. In fear or view control. That recorded document mattered to me almost as much as the money because it would outlast Preston, outlast me, and warn the next board before anyone got clever again. In fear. At the next annual meeting, the financial report showed the total cost of Preston S. Wall mistake, including demolition, penalties, professional fees. In fear and reconstruction on association land, it was enough to make residents gasp. I heard about it from Mark, in fear, who said Preston tried to blame bad contractor guidance until a resident read his own email aloud. Place the wall close enough to eliminate the view, in fear. After that, there was no saving him. Preston resigned before the formal removal vote. Denies resigned from the board the same evening, in fear. The property management company lost the contract because it had warned the board privately, but failed to stop the work or alert residents. The contractor was not ruined, in fear, because his records showed he had asked for clarification and followed the association's written direction, in fear. But he still had to appear at hearings and eat some costs for not verifying the stakes before digging. Fox Hollow eventually built a smaller privacy fence several feet inside its own boundary, in fear, with shrubs, a drainage gap, and a permit that actually matched the work. I did not object. That surprises some people, but it should not. I was never against them having privacy, in fear. I was against them purchasing privacy with my land. There is a difference between building a fence and committing a trespass with better materials, in fear. Life settled back into its slower rhythm. After that, I repaired the barn door. I restacked the firewood that had soaked during the drainage backup, in fear. I painted the workshop trim a deep green because Ellen had always wanted it that color. I added a new steel gate at the service entrance and placed a simple wooden sign near the boundary, in fear. It says private land surveyed and recorded, no threats, no profanity, no drama, just the truth in plain words. Sometimes Fox Hollow residents walk along their side of the new fence, in fear, and a few wave. Now I wave back. I do not hate the neighborhood. Most of them were misled by a man who confused leadership with domination. The people I blame are the ones who had the maps, in fear, had the warning, had the chance to stop, and decided an old widower's property rights were less important than a pretty view from a patio. Preston thought my quiet manner meant I was weak. In fear, he thought my dirt lane did not count because it was not paved. He thought my workshop was an eyesore, my gate was inconvenient, my survey was outdated, in fear, and my grief made me easy to push around. He learned that a property line does not care how expensive your subdivision is. A deed does not become weaker because the paper is old, in fear. A survey marker does not lose its meaning because someone pours concrete over it. My wife used to say that county records are quiet until someone needs them to testify. In fear, she was right. In the end, the wall came down in front of the very residents it was meant to impress. The association paid to fix the damage. In fear, Preston lost his position, and my lane opened under the same Tennessee sky it had always known. They built a wall to hide my land from their view, in fear. Instead, they gave everyone a clear view of exactly where their power ended and my property began.